Hi, Zizaran here with another Blight League starter. This is a Slayer, and you can use Reave or Blade Flurry with this build. Cyclone is getting nerfed in Blight, so this is a really strong alternative and an amazing League starter. It'll be very good for both hardcore or softcore, and also good for both Trade League and solo self-found. So should be a pretty good alternative regardless of what you've chosen to start on. Blade Flurry is going to end up being a little bit better single target, and Reave is going to be slightly more clear. However, both are interchangeably really good. So if you do have a strong preference, and for example, if you don't like Blade Flurry or you don't like Reave, you can just use the other instead of swapping out Blade Flurry for single target, for example. I'm about to show a video that we pre-recorded showing how my POBs are done. If you aren't familiar with them, they are pretty in-depth, and we explain a lot of new things about Path of Building, especially for new players. If you haven't seen it before, I suggest you stay and watch it. If not, you can skip it by clicking on the timestamp in the description down below. So first you need Path of Building. Path of Building is a third-party program that you can download, and it's in the description down below. It's completely safe, and most people use it. It's a very powerful tool that lets you plan out your builds and import items, stuff like that. Now, once you have Path of Building, you can go and import the Path of Building link here by pasting it here. Once you have that, it should look, well, it depends what build you're importing, because I'll use this for everything. But it should look like the build of the video you're watching. And what we do, and I'm using a Gladiator Thunder Cyclone build here as an example, I show a step-by-step of what the skill tree looks like at certain levels. So at early levels, it's very easy, especially if you're a new player, to follow. And I also say when to ascend, and the ascension points are generally here, and I'll talk about that in the specific video as well, and why things are chosen. But as you can see, the skill tree is evolving over time, and sometimes there will be variations for, you know, if it's like different weapons, if it's one-hander, two-hander, and a lot of things like that. But wait, there's more. Under the skills, we usually do all like the different skills plus the leveling one. I'm trying out a new sort of like alphabetized group. So this is like your main attack skill. So as you can see here, you have ground slam to 8 to 12, but at 12 it gets replaced by Sunder, and I kept that in the same like A, just so you're understanding what I'm replacing it with if there's no leveling video accompanying it. So hopefully that'll make it very clear. Same here with obviously at early level you're using Ancestral Protector, and then you replace that same B with War Chief later on. So we'll also put notes, like for example here, Pulverize doesn't exist yet in Path of Building, and there's a few things that they're just not in Path of Building at the time that I'm making this guide. This is going to happen a lot on videos that are made around launch, just Path of Building's not updated yet. So that's just not what much we can do about. And for the most part, I'll always put gems in a priority level. Like my first priority is always going to be Onslaught, just because it ups your clear speed so much while killing. And you can see like different utilities and stuff. And another example here is plus blood and sand, because that again doesn't exist in Path of Building. We also have different types of items. So here we have early game access, mid game access, and end game access. I think the jewels are displayed here. Yes. So the way I do this is I make some like fairly okay items that are like, you know, depending on how fast you play, somewhere that you'll have them between day 1 to 3. And if you don't know how to get a tabula, for example, you can farm that in Act 9 fairly easily in Blood Aqueduct. And we go through here, and it's I never in my guides will put resists on the life gear, because just you need to be resist capped. That's very important. 75% all resist. Remember that you lose resist in Act 5 and 10. And then on the jewels, I'll try to do 4-slot jewels and try to say as many good stats as possible for that build. So there's no like, you don't see the same one twice here, but all of these work for the build. Hopefully that'll help. And then this is generally how I recommend rolling flasks. There's even more in the notes as well. Mr. Madiki will generally go through and tell you exactly where to buy the skill gems that you're needed. This is actually a tip by another streamer called Lyric, who said he was sad there was nothing like this in Path of Exile guides. I was like, that is actually a great idea for new players. So we have that. So if you're wondering where to buy things, or if it can't be bought by your specific class, we call it a mule. Then you have to use another character to use it or to buy it. And all the details for that is in here. So hopefully it now makes more sense how to use the guides and how they work. Let's continue with the build guide. So this is a Slayer build using swords, and the gear is pretty easy to obtain. Everything is very similar to our other guides in terms of notes and skills and items. So we have the league start set here, and you can see that we've like min-maxed and tried to use very cheap, easy to obtain gear, because if the build works on a really low budget, it's just gonna feel better the more expensive it gets. And obviously I'm personally very against all these like crazy over-promising builds on other YouTube channels and the build forums on Path of Exile. So we try to under-promise and then usually make people extra happy. So the build concept here is we're trying to get as much AoE as possible to make it feel really comfortable, and extra melee. It has very large range, and we're going to be showing that in the background while we're playing as well. And you can see that once the Reave in particular kicks in, it's got basically screen wide clear. Now the video is using the old impact, but it's also not using anything like ink AoE or much plus range at all. So you can technically get it even bigger, even though there has been some AoE nerfs. A lot of the build's damage comes from Impale as well, which does not show up properly in Path of Building. In a lot of my guides in the past, I've used things like custom adding the Impale damage on a item. We haven't done that here. It gets a lot of, especially new players, confused as to why on champion builds there's like a ton of flat damage on an item, and people keep asking how we get those items. With the 100 beautiful extra flat fizz, and on non-champion builds, people keep asking how do we get the 109 extra more melee physical damage. So it's just going to do more damage basically than the POB actually shows, because Impale is a really strong mechanic. POB doesn't show it. Once you have decent gear, things like Guardians should also be very easy on this build, even Shaper. However, things with multiple stages can be a bit of a struggle, especially when you're on like the lower tier of gear, because you do rely a decent amount on Val double strike. So when you're only using like Reave or only using Blade Flurry and your Val double strike is down, for example in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Chimera stage, you might feel it's a bit less. But the build definitely rewards a lot of gear, and once you start going towards something like 400 PDPS foils, which isn't particularly unachievable, and definitely like the base currency sink for the build, you start instating things. So I want to try a new thing for my build guides, because a lot of the times on other guides we have a lot of questions and we haven't always answered them in the guide. So we're gonna try asking some questions and answering them on the guide, which I hope will be very helpful for new players. So sometimes we've accidentally in POB put too many gems in. For this is a build that we played, and the gems suggested should be exactly max 4 sockets. So you shouldn't have any problems with gems. Mana issues can be solved in several ways. Now, sadly, Leech on Boots has been removed, which is a big blow to me personally. It's like my favorite way to solve mana issues, especially for non-boss killers. Regen on Boots for mana has been removed as well. I think it's been added as a separate enchant, so it's not life and mana anymore. It's either life or mana. Horrible change. Don't like it at all. But anyway, we do have a flask that gives mana. That is an option. That is my least favorite way of maintaining mana, and past level 40 should, in my opinion, not be used. You have some nodes on the tree as well. You have 2 leech nodes, both for life and mana, right below Vaal Pact. These are easily accessible early on and really good. The first node giving 0.4 mana and life leech. So that's great, especially if you're pathing right next to it, which we are very close to, especially early on. So they're very, very good. Later on, we are going right by the Essence Sap node, so putting 1 point in there should be easily enough to not have any mana issues. And my favorite solution to mana issues, especially for melee, is getting a Viridian Jewel with... you can get both the stats mana gain on hit, which goes up to 2. Physical attack damage, least as mana, can also be gotten on a Viridian Jewel. It's very, very cheap, very easy to get. Obviously, if you want to get, you know, for example, life and damage on a Leech Jewel, that can be hard, but getting just the mana, very easy. It's not even too hard to roll yourself with alterations. So that is my favorite way to solve mana issues. Endgame wise, if you use the serrated fossil on a chest, you can get minus 15 mana cost on chest. You can also get minus mana cost on rings. So you can fairly easily on attack builds get that down to 0 mana used on your attacks and stuff. And there is also mana leech on gloves. So a lot of good options to solve mana here. The build uses face acrobatics, fortify, and a basalt flask for defenses. You also use flesh and stone to blind your enemies. So especially with the basalt flask up, feels fairly safe. It's not a super tank like my Juggernaut builds and the Guardian builds and stuff. You're not going to be like face tanking everything, but it definitely should be enough that while your defenses are up, you should be able to kill like fairly tanky bosses too, because we have a lot of damage on this build. Now you do get some leech on this build, but you actually don't get a ton, so you will be relying on life flasks as well to regen your life on fights. I usually make sure that you have at least a bubbling or hopefully a seething life flask. I prefer seething. Now, auras on this build are different from early game and end game. So early on, we're using Herald of Ash, Herald of Purity, and Blood and Sand. On hardcore, you can use Flesh and Stone instead of Blood and Sand as well, just to get that blind early on. Very, very nice and defensive, even though it did get nerfed. If you feel like you're very low on mana while leveling, feel free to drop one and drop some damage. Being out of mana all the time is no fun, obviously. And around level 60, and when we start using Impale a lot, you want to switch to a full physical setup. And then you use Pride, Flesh and Stone, Precision, and Blood and Sand. However, to use all 4, you're actually going to need it in line level 3, which can be fairly pricey. Until then, you can drop Blood and Sand, and you have to make sure that the Precision is level 1. It doesn't use the same reservation. Like, it's not a percentage. It's a flat amount. So this build uses Impale. Like I said, it's not properly calculated in PoB, which means that we have more damage than both in-game and PoB actually shows, unless you use a Excel spreadsheet to add it custom to one individual item. So it is just from Impale, gets a lot of damage. It's very nice, should feel very comfortable. You also get Rage from attacking, and then you can use Berserk whenever you're fighting a big enemy or a boss, and you should be able to mow that down very quickly. And you also have the Vaal Double Strike. So once you pop your Berserk and your Vaal Double Strike, anything that's like one stage should melt. The biggest drawback to this build is that leveling a melee build, especially like day 1 on a league, can be a little bit clunky. It still feels really good. It's more if you're like a racer and you're trying to go really fast, spell builds definitely still have an advantage just on how much they gain per level of the actual gem. That's something that melee did receive, but it's not on the same level as spells. So other than that, it is a very well overall balanced build. I hope you enjoy it. The biggest finance burden for this build is definitely going to be upgrading your weapons. Getting anything over like 380 or 400 DPS on your sword gonna be pretty expensive. Spamming Jag Fossils on sword is not a bad idea at all. There's no particularly great reason to be using Shaped or elder weapons. Shaped can get the physis extra, which is nice. But on this, we really want to be like full physical, so not really aiming for much elemental damage here. So just spamming Jags on a item level 83 foil would be very nice. Also, make sure when you're crafting that you're using like the hell version, as we'd call it in Diablo 2. No, don't use like a bad version of the foil. You can go on the wiki and check, for example, jeweled foil is what you would want. Now, for leveling this build, early on we're using Grand Slam and then we're using Sunder. You can use Reave and Blade Flurry pretty much as soon as you get them. However, there's something about Sunder that just, even though it doesn't really get any flat added, it just generally feels better early on and is really good. Obviously, Sunder doesn't use swords, but you can switch to that later on, probably around 50-60, especially when you have all the Impale stuff set up and stuff. For Bandits, this build helps Illyria. You want the crit and you want resist. So for items for this build, you can see here that the League Start especially is very, very generic. Rares, 300 DPS foils, which can be slightly hard to get early on, but if you are struggling to get them, there's a lot of options, like for example, An's Might. You can get a Skava, and you can also get an Ichimonji. So there are some unique options as well, but even getting anything like 220, 250 PDPS foils, you should have a easy time with the early game, and saving up money to get some decent weapons later shouldn't be too much of a struggle. As per normal, it's just all like life and some flat physical, and we don't normally include resists on these, but you do need to get resist count. The only reason I do this is because I don't like specifically telling people get 37 resist on your belt and get 27 resist on your ring. Just make sure you are resist capped, and do remember that when killing Kitava in both Act 5 and Act 10 that you lose resist. So check your resists when entering Act 6 and the endgame in the epilogue. As for leveling uniques and stuff, you can use the normal stuff like Gold Rim and stuff like that, and Tabula. They're all great. There's nothing that really stands out as far as leveling weapons and stuff. Do remember that you can still use the belt recipe, where you use a blue or a rare rustic sash and then a blacksmith whetstone and a weapon. That forces percentage physical damage onto the weapon, and then you can aug and maybe regal it, but obviously regals can be hard to find early on, and you have a very usable weapon. Try to do that on the best base that you can find, like the highest required level base you can find, or the level you're currently at. Movement speed isn't particularly important for this build, so you can end up getting really, really nice high life, high resist boots with no MS, because you can use leap slam as your main movement method. So you can just be leap slamming around, and you can end up saving yourself easily like 40 to 80 chaos and getting some beastly life resist boots. Jewels are crazy important for this build. Obviously, murderous jewels can be really hard to get, expensive ones. Mostly try to get either a searching or a murderous with onslaught on kill, so you don't have to waste, a flask slot or anything to get onslaught. And we have some examples here of good jewels. Like, we've just put as many as possible of like the good stats, so you guys know what is like workable for your build. But the trend here, try to get life, and then 2 other stats is fine. Flasks as well, very, very important. Endgame wise, you want to use Lion's Roar, very important. Very large amount of damage. Obviously can be very expensive early on, especially if melee is very popular. You want to have freeze, bleed, and curse removal. You can get bleed removal or corrupted blood immunity on a jewel from corrupting it. But yeah, make sure those 3 are the most important. But both jewels and fast is something that's like very underrated by new players. And I want to like talk extra about it, make sure people understand, because sometimes people will be watching a guide and seeing how fast maybe a streamer or someone making a video is clearing, and they feel like they've done the same, but they haven't, paid as much attention to jewels and flasks, and they're very, very important in Path of Exile. Pantheons for this build is Solaris. Upgrading everything there is actually pretty great, and Shakari, once you've upgraded the poison immune, is amazing. Lesser Pantheon doesn't really matter much until you get the poison upgrade. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. We tried a few new things. Let me know how you like, especially if the question things is a good thing, that we should keep doing that. I will try to do that for all the videos coming up for Blight, and there'll be quite a few other ones. Hope the video helps. Hope you guys have the best time in Blight. If you like the channel and want to support it, we'll put all the sellout stuff below in the description. If you have any questions or you get stuck on anything, or maybe we've gone too fast with something, you can always ask any questions live on my channel, twitch.tv/Zizaran. Should be live, hopefully, all the time, or I'm sleeping. And thanks for watching. Try to die less than I do.